I recently purchased a property and decided that I would need to rent it out for at least 1 to 2 years before moving in based on the amount of debt that I have taken on. This is where my partner and I decided to privately rent the property, and thus the search for tenants began. I've actually been a landlord now for a number of years as well on another property, and my parents have self-managed property in the past, which is where I've learned a lot of what I know today. So I figured it would be a good idea to discuss exactly what a landlord is looking for in a tenant, hoping to provide some insight to anyone who's looking to acquire a rental. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Reece, and today's video is all about maximizing your ability to secure a rental if you are someone who is applying for rentals, or if you are a landlord or planning to be a landlord, all of the things you should be taking into consideration when looking for a tenant. I want to start off by saying that the best thing I have ever done since I started renting out my investment properties was to treat my tenants like people, not income sources. Other than some basic information that gets provided from an applicant, there really is no guaranteed way to know the type of person that you're going to have living in your property unless you specifically know them. I personally like to build relationships with my tenants. I want them to enjoy the space that they are paying for, and I want them to feel comfortable to tell me if something is not working, if something needs to be fixed, or if something needs to be improved. This is very important to me. So how the person interacts with me throughout the application process is one of the major factors I take into consideration when looking to select a new tenant. Because like I said, unless the landlord specifically knows the person who's going to be moving in, the only way to really gauge the person that's going to be living in your house is through first impressions. There aren't a whole lot of steps towards finding a new tenant and accepting them to rent out your property. Now I'm going to go through a couple of examples and actually break down all of the steps that I went through to rent out my current property and explain the good and the bad applicants. Basically, without naming and shaming, I'm going to tell you the specific examples of things that definitely put people into strong contendership and people that definitely were put on my no list immediately. So building on what I just touched on, the first thing that I want to cover in today's video is first impressions. It's not all about the information you provide, nor is it about how much you can pay. Generally, it's how you present yourself that is going to have a massive impact through the selection process. For this property that I've recently rented out, I set up an ad, and within 1 week I had 10,000 views on the ad. That's how busy the market is right now where I live here in South Australia. From that, I had 200 people reply to me with interest in moving into the property, and I had about 15 serious applicants, and this was within, I think it was 5 days that I kept the ad up before having to take it down because I felt that I had enough people that were going to come through the house that we would have to pick at least one of them. Now, out of these 15 strong applicants, I made the effort to call each and every single one and speak to them over the phone. And during the phone call, I asked some generic questions like, why are you moving out of your current rental? What do you do for work? And who in particular would be moving into the property if your application was successful? Black and white, the ones who stood out were the ones who gave me clear and concise answers. Out of those 15 people, there definitely were some who beat around the bush, who couldn't get to the point, and I don't know why, but realistically, I don't care. I asked them a very specific question, one that I'm definitely allowed to ask, and they couldn't answer the question. So from this point, from this first interaction over the phone, not even from the message they sent me through the advertisement, from this first interaction over the phone, I started taking notes on the people who were applying for the house. During this phone call as well, I also gave them the opportunity to ask me any questions they had. And again, the ones who definitely stood out were the ones who had questions prepared that were important questions to ask, such as what would the bond be? When could we move in? When could we come and inspect the property? And is the house pet friendly for those who had animals? Just as a note, I'm going to come back to the specific documentation and information you should have ready to go to supply anyone on any rental later on in this video. For now, I'm talking about the impression component. I am mentioning bits and bobs about the information that you might need to provide, but just understand I will go through an extensive list as I get more towards the back end of this video. So I'm going to quickly skip the screening component of their information and move all the way directly to the first time I actually met these people at the inspections that I held. And I want to talk about this because again, it still builds on this first impression scenario. I held 2 opens across 2 different days. I gave all of the applicants that wanted to come and see the property a window time frame to come and see it, and I was generous with the time frame. I gave them from 4 to 6 p.m. on 2 different days throughout the week to make sure that they had every opportunity they needed to come and see the place. I also gave them plenty of notice, so if they couldn't make it in time, they would be able to send me a message and organize another time to come and see the house. Now, this is really important to understand. The applicants who shined, the ones who stood out from the crowd, were the ones who were on time and the ones who were there on the first open. Out of the 15 serious applicants, the people who were very serious about renting this place out, only one group came to the property on time. They were there 5 minutes early actually, and they stood out the front and I waved them in. I said, come in, come say hello. And they walked through the house. They did everything they needed to do. I had a conversation with them, spoke to them, really great first impression, and they left. And then other people trickled in throughout that period, that 4 to 6 p.m. period. Now, in my books, the people who really wanted that property would have been there at the start of that open, and there was one group that was there. Tick. To also build on this group as well, they had made a really good impression with the messages they had been sending me. The over the phone conversation went really well as well, and they had provided me with all the information I requested, which I'll talk more about in a moment as well. These people were definitely serious about renting this place out, and they were making a good impression over other people who were also making good impressions, but they were being outdone by this group who very clearly wanted the property. And the reason why I'm saying it like this and putting a lot of emphasis on it is because it really showed me that they wanted the place. Not that they wanted the place, it showed me that they wanted the place. They wanted to live there, they were excited, they asked questions, they were polite, they made sure to do everything within their power to make the best first impression. Okay, let's move on to what I specifically asked each applicant to provide me with to support their application. And if you could quickly just hit that like and subscribe button down below, I'm gonna plug myself here. I would really appreciate the support. It definitely helps the channel grow. Let's get into it. The specific things I asked each applicant to provide me with include, but is not limited to, number 1, their full names and all of the names of the people who would be on the rental agreement living in the property. Number 2, proof of identity. So a scanned copy of their driver's license for proof of identity purposes. What their occupations were for proof of income, generally in the format of a recent payslip, would be more than enough. Definitely their reference list. Any previous rental history needs references to be accompanied with that. So I asked them to provide any references they had. And finally, any information that they thought might support their application moving forward. Now, this really wasn't a big ask. Anyone who's looking to obtain a rental, move out of home, move into a new place, should have this information ready to go. It's almost expected for anyone who's looking to rent in South Australia, let alone all of Australia, let alone probably all of the world. Now, here's the hidden thing. As a landlord, out of this request for information, I was looking for 2 things in particular. The first thing was that the applicants provide every single piece of information that I've asked for, not just some of it, all of it, where I had quite a few applicants not provide me with some of the information that I asked for. This is frustrating because I've asked them to provide me with some information that's not that hard of a request. I've said, please give me all of this information for me to consider your application. And some of them just didn't provide that information. Not even things like income. I'm talking like the name of the person that's going to be living in the property. I know they assume that it's in the email trail or it's in their email headline or it's their name that I've got saved in their phone, but that's not the point. I asked them to provide that information in a clear-cut format that I could scan through, start my screening process, and not have to dig up names here and there. Realistically, this was a test in itself to see if they could follow instructions, and more than half, I'm going to say more than half, were missing information. And the second thing was that I provided them with an email and said, can you please provide all of this information via email at your earliest convenience? And I gave them more than enough time to do that. When I said that, I meant one single email. Again, quite a large number of the people who were applying put together like multiple emails to send me bits and pieces. I had one person send me an email of each individual person's name as separate emails. Like I got 4 emails and it was 4 different names. I'm like, put them all together. It's not helpful having it all apart and not neatly presented. It's not complicated. It's 2022. Make an email with all of your attachments and write out all of the information that the person who is going to be your landlord is asking for. Put it all there in one clean cut email. I bet you can guess which group was able to follow that instruction and which group was able to do that immediately, not within 3 weeks. And it was the group that came on time and the group that made a good first impression. Do you know why? Probably because they were looking for a rental and they had all of that information ready to go, and it wasn't going to be a complex scenario. I asked them realistically for 3 steps along this process, and they smashed every single one out of the park. Just as an additional piece of information as well, if you are applying for rentals, don't send text messages with your personal information unless it's requested, and definitely don't bring hard copies to an inspection. There's going to be a lot of people there potentially. The landlord isn't going to have time to screen you physically then and there with your hard copy documents. If they request for an email to be sent, make one concise email and send that information off. Once I had gathered all of that information, I started the screening process. I basically went from top to bottom of the emails where there was enough information within them to screen them, and then I went straight to the references and started calling them. I bet you can guess which group had all of their references in check, and once I called all of their references, I got really positive responses out of them. It was the group that was on time, that provided me with all of the information I asked, and also made a really good first impression. And I think you can see where I'm going with this. Who we ended up going with was that group. They smashed their entire application out of the park. Their references checked out. They provided me with all the information I asked for in a concise, singular email. They arrived early on the first open on time and made a very, very good first impression. And speaking with them over the phone as well, they were polite, to the point, they asked the right questions, and they gave me the opportunity to provide them with the information they needed about the property. Several months into their tenancy, I'm very happy we went with them, and it's very reflective of their application because of how they presented that information to me. I want to make it very clear, there were some other strong applicants for sure, but they just killed their competition by putting in that little bit of extra effort. I'll say extra effort, and they just smashed it. Like, I can't say anything bad about their application. It was excellent in every format. As a landlord trying to pick new tenants, I basically started with that original phone call and started playing Guess Who. As people kind of didn't provide me with the information that they needed to provide me with, I knocked their names off the list and worked my way all the way to the end where I found the best suited tenant for that property. For anyone who is trying to secure a rental, these are the steps that I highly recommend putting the extra effort into, because again, like I said at the start of this video, it is not all about the information you provide, nor is it about how much you are willing to pay for a place. Had a lot of people offer me more money than what we were asking for, and that wasn't what we wanted in an applicant. We wanted someone who was going to make the space a home and live in it as if it was their own, because I'm hoping that they get to stay there for a really long period of time if they want to do that. On top of this as well, they put that effort in and they deserved it. They earned this opportunity, and I'm really glad we got to go with them. I'm kind of fanboying over my new tenants. I just really am glad that we went with them, and I've had a really positive experience through this screening process. Getting all of these steps right is a sure way to stand out among the crowd, especially in times like this where rentals are just absolutely crazy at the moment. I had some people come through telling me that there were 100 people lined up to basically get into a rental. That is scary. We had roughly 40 people come through the property over the course of the 2 days, which I myself thought was quite a lot in this market. If you are a landlord who is looking to privately rent out your own property and are looking for steps and advice on how to screen a tenant, definitely look further into and follow the steps that I've talked about in this video. It will not hurt to do those extra checks, especially if there again is someone who stands out in the crowd. If the applicant is putting in the work to obtain a tenancy, then there's probably a good sign that they are going to take care of the property as well, because they are the type of person to put in that effort. Now, a question for you, the viewer: if there is anything that I have missed or anything that's important that should definitely be considered, please drop me a comment down below. I think this could be a really useful tool to someone who might stumble across this video who's looking to get into a property. I think that there is a lot of good information in this video, and I think that it is definitely going to be insightful for anyone who is really needing this information to boost their application game. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope it was insightful. I hope you learned something, and if you did, please hit that like and subscribe button down below. It really helps the channel grow, and I really do appreciate the support. And with that being said, I'm going to leave you there. Have a good day, have a good week, and as always, I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.